Hi, how are you? My name is Adriana Ospina. I'm the curator of the Art Museum of the Americas of the Organization of the American States. It is a great pleasure to be part of the Visual Voices Professional Lecture Series, and I really want to thank Professor Harold Litton for inviting me to be part of this program. I gotta say, it's not easy to put together a video when you haven't done it before, but truly it is a great challenge. So before I tell you about the work that I do at the Art Museum of the Americas and a little bit of its history, I would like to tell you about myself. I was born and raised in Bogota, Colombia. I came here to the States in 2006 to study English after I'd finished my undergrad in history, and I specialized in history of science. And it was here where I developed my truly love for museums. I didn't know that I was going to end up working in an art museum, but one day someone told me to apply to an internship at this little museum in the heart of Washington, D.C. And I did. And while I was there, I was confronted with the history of Latin American art, with the role that museums play as an educators outside of the classroom, and I fell immediately in love. I began to work on one of the most amazing archives of Latin American art that we have in the United States. And while I was doing that work, I began my master's degree at George Mason University. And as many as other of my classmates, I worked full time at the museum while going through the program, and it was an amazing experience. And I did it under the leadership of Professor Michelle Grit. She specializes in Latin American art and has two amazing books. And under her leadership, I finished my master's, and I kept working at the museum. And I went from being an intern, then managing the educational programs, then working as the registrar, until today becoming the curator of the permanent collection. So it has been quite a ride for a very long time. I've been working at the museum for about 12 years, and in my personal opinion, the work that we do, it's very unique. I would like to tell you now a little bit of the history of the museum, who we are. So the Art Museum of the Americas is part of the Organization of the American States. I don't know if you have heard of the OEAS. The OEAS, it's located on between 17th and 18th and on Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C. And it has this beautiful garden. You will recognize the building immediately. Is a building called Paul Philip Craig. And the OAS is the oldest international organization. Let's say that it's like the UN, but for the Americas and the Caribbean. Every single country has an ambassador to the OAS, from Canada to Argentina and the Caribbean. Right now, Cuba, it's not represented. And what the OAS does is to work on issues of democracy, human rights, security, and development. So we are a department of this very large organization, and our role is to promote the art of the Americas, mainly Latin America, through these pillars of the organization. So all our exhibitions are related with these topics. We work with migration, inclusion, cooperation, and different issues like this. So the museum was founded in The Art Museum of the Americas was founded in 1976 and in what used to be the residence of the Secretary General of the Organization of American States. This beautiful Spanish colonial building built by Paul Philip Cret and Albert Casely in 1912. The museum is located on 18th and Constitution, where Constitution and Virginia Avenue merged. And the main goal of the museum at that time was to house the permanent collection of the Organization of American States that by the 70s was already very robust and had pieces from almost all the countries of the Americas. So how this collection was formed, it's really interesting piece of history, and I would like to tell you how it worked. The OEAS, which was the former Pan-American Union, began promoting art since very early on with the Unit of Intellectual Cooperation. And what they would do was to put together these small traveling exhibitions that were run by the Smithsonian Traveling Exhibition Service. And they will put together these reproductions of art, or photography, or slides, and they will travel around the States to promote Latin American art. And this program was actually directed by Concha Romero James, who was the person who hired the Cuban art critic José Gómez-Sicre, who will run the museum and the OEAS art exhibition program for quite a long time. So José Gómez-Sicre actually has a very interesting history. He was born in Cuba. He worked for La Galería del Prado over there. He helped Alfred Barr in the organization of the very first Cuban painting exhibition in the 1930s at MoMA, and then he arrived at the OEAS to work with Concha Romero James, and his very first task was to help in the writing of these monographs of already very well established Latin American artists, and one was, for example, Diego Rivera. So after Concha Romero James left the OEAS, he became the head of the visual art unit that then became the division of visual arts, and later the museum. And he created a very interesting exhibition program, and actually it was a very busy program. It was a monthly exhibitions. He will travel around the Americas and the Caribbean, identifying young artists that had the potential to become famous, and actually what he did was to launch their careers at the OEAS. One by one, all the artists that he showed at the Organization of American States and who he launched in the United States with these exhibitions became really famous. Some will argue that those are the masters of Latin American art that we know today. So some of these artists are Alejandro Obregón of Colombia, Fernando de Sisto of Peru, Maria Luisa Pacheco of Bolivia, José Luis Cuevas from Mexico, Armando Morales from Nicaragua, Asilia Guillén from Nicaragua as well. So basically what he did with these exhibitions were put in a gallery, and in this gallery at the time these works were for sale, so the general public of Washingtonians that wanted to get a piece from these exhibitions, they could come, and the money of the pieces will go directly to the artist. And what he did was to put together an advisory committee that would advise him in which piece to acquire for the permanent collection of the organization. So the core collection that we have came from those exhibitions, and the purchase fund that the OAS granted him lasted from 1957 to the 1980s. We no longer had that purchase fund, and we are not able to acquire pieces like that. And the other pieces that were coming to the permanent collection came through gifts, artists that were already famous that we couldn't get through that purchase fund. We received donations from the different countries, from, for example, the IBM, that had this amazing collection of Latin American art, donated several pieces to the museum, like the like the very famous Amelia Pelaez hibiscus piece that we have. So today, this collection has 2,000 pieces. We recently acquired a few pieces, actually a large collection of 150 pieces from Canada as part of the as being part of the Organization of American States entails that we should be working with artists also from Canada and the United States. So the collection has been growing that way, and I would like to show you some of the pieces that we have, and to give you an example of the different facets of the collection. And I take this idea of facets from our former curator of collections, who actually was my mentor at the museum, and he had a very interesting way of seeing the collection, and she saw it by different facets. And it's a collection that champions abstraction, as we will see, but it also has very interesting examples of what we call modern primitivism. We had a very interesting collection of pieces from the Caribbean that are part of that trend. We have both lyrical abstraction and geometric abstraction, and we have a very interesting collection of Japanese Latin American artists, and José Gómez-Sicre was very fond of them. They were amazing abstract artists that were able to merge their Japanese background with what was happening in the country of arrival. And these countries are Brazil, Argentina, and Peru. So I would like to show you a little bit of that in this stream of images that you're gonna see, and in that way you can see the different aspects that make the collection of the Art Museum of the Americas. Some of the facets of the collection I would like to highlight today are the following. Established artists before José Gómez-Sicre, with the work of Cándido Portinari titled Returned from the Fair. This oil on canvas was the very first piece that entered to the permanent collection in 1949 and was a gift of José Gómez-Sicre himself. Cándido Portinari is the same artist who painted the murals at the Hispanic section at the Library of Congress. Other very well established artists before José Gómez-Sicre began to work at the Organization of American States was Joaquín Torres Garcia, a Uruguayan artist who spent most of his life in Europe and at the end of his life went back to Uruguay and founded the Torres Garcia Workshop, a school that brought to the south of Latin America the first ideas of geometric abstraction. The following artist that we have here is Roberto Mata from Chile. He also spent most of his time in Europe. He left Chile after he finished school, and in Europe he became acquainted with the Surrealist movement, and he transitioned from architecture to being a Surrealist painter. The other facet that I would like to show you is lyrical abstraction, one of the favorite facets of José Gómez-Sicre. The first work that I want to highlight is this painting by Costa Rican artist Lola Fernandez, Return of the Ancestor from 1967. The other piece I would like to highlight right now is Precolombino by Aníbal Villasís from Ecuador, one of the prominent artists part of what we call Andean abstraction. Jorge de la Vega, an Argentine artist, it's part of this lyrical abstraction movement. He, with this piece, De Vice, shows that experimentation with textures and the canvas, trying to work form indirectly. The other facet that I would like to show you is geometric abstraction, one facet that our collection it's pretty strong, one facet that is really strong in our collection. So this first work that we have here is by Colombian artist Eduardo Ramírez Villamizar, and this is an early work of 1957 titled Composición Mecánica. And what is really incredible about this particular painting is that it shows the sculptures that Villamizar will do later in his career. I also want to highlight in this geometric abstraction facets the work by Cuban artist René Puertocarrero, Figures in Yellow from 1952. And the work by Enrique Careaga from Paraguay, Sphere Spatio-Temporal, and is a work in which he managed to compose a visual transition and visual movement, let's say kinetic movement, with the shape of these disco balls and the colors. Other facet that I would like to highlight today, it's more modern primitivism, and José Gómez-Sicre was really keen on looking for these artists, most of them self-taught that he found in his trips to the different countries of Latin America. So one of these examples is José Antonio Velázquez from Honduras, view of San Antonio de Oriente. Also from this facet, we have José Jean Gilles from Haiti with this Haitian landscape, and Everett Brown from Jamaica with this totem of 1972. And the last facet of the collection that I would like to highlight today is a facet that I'm particularly interested, a facet that I've been working with for quite a long time, and is the focus of a research and exhibition that I will tell you more later in this class, and is what we call Japanese Latin American artists. And here I want to show you the work of Manabu Mabe, Agony, from 1963. Manabu Mabe was born in Japan and came to Brazil with his family to work in a coffee plantation. Then we have this work by Tomio Take, who arrived to Brazil right before the Second World War began and decided to remain in Brazil. And we have also the work here of Kazuya Sakai, who is an Argentine artist that spent a pretty long period of his career in the United States. He is very well collected at the Blanton Museum, for example, and Sakai's parents were from Japan. He spent some time some time studying in Japan, and we have this abstract work titled Painting Number 62 from 1964. So by now you might be wondering what happened with Diego Rivera, Frida Kahlo, and the other two Mexican muralists. And the reason why we don't have pieces by them in the collection is because José Gómez-Sicre didn't sympathize with the political charge that Diego Rivera's art had, but he also thought that his aesthetic in the 1940s was already outdated, and he was going for a more abstract vocabulary. And also the Organization of American States, as during the Cold War, didn't champion communism. So that's why we don't have those pieces in the collection. However, it is important to explain that José Gómez-Sicre, despite not agreeing with Diego Rivera and not liking his work, he knew the importance of the work that he had done and the importance of his work for history. So in a letter to Nelson Rockefeller, in which he is inquiring about the possibility of some gift to the permanent collection, he, in the list of works that he gives to Rockefeller, he mentions Diego Rivera because he thought that was important for the collection to be complete, having those works. That being said, we never got to acquire them. Then they became incredibly expensive, and it was only until the end of the Cold War that we acquired some prints by the other two muralists, David Alfaro Siqueiros and José Clemente Orozco. Beautiful prints, but however they are not as important as other works. Besides the permanent collection, other aspect that I would like to highlight is our archives of Latin American art. The Art Museum of the Americas has one of the most important repositories of documents of modern and contemporary Latin American art in the United States. These archives are visited by scholars from all over the world who are interested in the work that José Gómez-Sicre did, the way that he organized his exhibition program, but also Latin American art even before José Gómez-Sicre. And as I mentioned before, Concha Romero James was the person who was working in the unit of intellectual cooperation, and as she was organizing these traveling exhibitions that I mentioned before, she was also collecting documents, pamphlets, press clippings, photographies, correspondence of the different artists and the different exhibitions that were taking place in Latin America or in different parts of the world about Latin American art. And this practice of collecting press clippings, photographs, correspondence lasted during the entire tenure of José Gómez-Sicre. So one of the particular practice they had is that the OEAS has country offices. Every single member country of the Organization of American States has an office in the country. And he will ask if someone at the office could cut and paste in paper clippings of the different exhibitions, the different openings, the different things that artists were doing, to collect pamphlets and send all this to Washington, D.C. And actually that's why we have this amazing repository of information. And in my particular case, I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the lecture, when I arrived as an intern to the museum, my first task, because I studied history and I loved archives, was to sit down, go by one, each folder, each piece of paper, and clean them, use acid-free paper, acid-free tape, make sure everything was organized, and use acid-free folders. And today, well, not right now because of the pandemic, but usually these archives are open to the public by appointment, and we are really happy to see how important the information that we have is, and this shows how José Gómez-Sicre and his program and the work that was done before him is what actually today is the Latin American art field. The fact that he had a program in which the artist could come, show, and that he saved all that information, the way in that he published information about the Latin American art scene in general. So we have these bulletins that are part of archives in which you can read about the different exhibitions that they were taking place in the 50s, 60s and 70s. You can learn, for example, about the Sao Paulo Bienal. You can learn about the famous exhibition or in Latin America organized by the Standard Oil. So the documentations that we have gives you bits and pieces and a panorama of the field in which José Gómez-Sicre and the Organization of American States were working at the time. So after seeing some of the pieces of our permanent collection, I wanted to tell you more about what we have been doing to promote it. So in 2017, we launched this book, the very first one in 35 years, titled Art of the Americas, Collection of the Art Museum of the Americas of the Organization of American States. This book features 100 works of our collection and 3 essays that contextualize the work that the organization through the museum has been doing in promoting Latin American art, and how the work that José Gómez-Sicre did helped to create the notion of Latin American art, the concept of Latin American art we know and we study today. The book also has a whole chapter on José Gómez-Sicre, and the idea we wanted to do a democratic process on this project. So we put together a committee that helped us to choose from the entire permanent collection the 100 that they consider the most important, and then we work with different art historians who had been very close and have studied our collection for quite a long time. So they wrote the essays, and also we put another group of 10 writers specialized in Latin American art who wrote the different entries to the book, to each of these 100 pieces. This is a bilingual project. So I'm just showing you here a page of the book that has a biography and a description of the artwork. You can find this book online, and here you can find the link, and you can access the 3 essays and the description of every single piece. After talking and concentrating in our permanent collection for quite a bit, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the exhibitions we have of the museum. We have been promoting our collection during the last few years and making an effort to have exhibitions of the permanent collection all the time, or exhibitions that dialogue with other pieces, but always something related to the exhibition. But we also have outside projects that come to us either directly from the country, from one of the countries of the OAS. Listen, we want to do this exhibition featuring a group of artists or these artists, or we also receive independent curatorial projects. All our projects deal with the Americas, mostly Latin America, but we have had exhibitions of Canada recently, for example, too. So all these exhibitions go to our advisory committee. Our advisory committee actually evaluates the relevance of the curatorial work that is being presented to us, the relevance of the artists, the relevance of the aesthetic, and how the particular exhibition connects to our mission, that is to foster the main pillars of the Organization of American States. So to give you an example, I want to talk about 2 particular exhibitions, recent exhibitions of the last few years. One is Carolina Mayorga, Pink Ranchos, and another ephemeral zip codes. Carolina Mayorga is a Colombian-born artist who lives in the United States, in Washington, so it's a Washingtonian local artist, and she put together these pink Fragmented Reality in the Museum is a site-specific exhibition that dealt with the issue of home and homelessness in the Americas, and also her what based on her own experience, and what she have seen in Colombia, coming from Colombia, and how women and children are the most affected and vulnerable in these kind of situations. So she went through some of the readings of the human rights, of the Commission of Human Rights, which is actually a department of the OAS, and all the hearings are public, and you can get all these testimonials. So she used these testimonials of women that have been affected by violence, domestic violence, and she made part of that. Those were testimonials were part of the exhibition. Another exhibition that we had recently was Amazogramas by Roberto Huarcaya, a Peruvian artist that does his big format, huge format photography in the Amazon, an exhibition that creates awareness about the environment and climate change, both topics really important for the Inter-American agenda of the OAS. Now I want to tell you more about my curatorial work, the curatorial work that I do. Again, my curatorial work is basically based on our permanent collection, and in the last few years we have been doing different exhibitions that focus in the different facets that I was mentioning of the collection. One of the current exhibitions I put together was the exhibition that accompanied the launch of the book. I had the challenge of fitting the 100 works in the museum, and do aesthetically and thematically pleasing exhibition in which people could actually emerge in the pages of the book and know more of what we have. So that was a very challenging and interesting project, and I guess my biggest project so far is an exhibition, a traveling exhibition based on the permanent collection that it's about to launch in the Kalamazoo Institute of Art in October. And the title of this exhibition is Cultural Encounters, and it's a project based on an exhibition that I created in 2013 in the museum titled Fusion, Asian Migration to the Americas, tracing Asian migration to the Americas through the Art Museum of the Americas permanent collection. So remember that facet I was mentioning about how we had Japanese artists of different countries of the Americas. We also traced some Chinese and Indian descent artists in the Caribbean. So I wanted to do a bigger project, and that exhibition was quite successful and was like a small showcase of what we could do. And after that exhibition, Fusion, took place, our International Arts and Artists, this organization that travels exhibition, and they do a great job on promoting and putting together and traveling exhibitions, approached to us, wanted to do and organize a project with the Art Museum of the Americas, and we agreed that we wanted to take Fusion further to what it's now Cultural Encounters. That is an exhibition that is based on our collection, but it has expanded to to incorporate other artists and pieces that are not part of the collection and truly tell the stories about these migrations. So this exhibition has the geographical component is really important. We wanted to show in a map the trajectories of the different migrations, but also and the place where they arrived in the Americas and the Caribbean. But we also wanted to tell the histories, how they arrived, under which circumstances, how they became independent, how, in a way, indentured labor after abolition of slavery became another type of slavery, and we wanted to actually highlight that and the importance of knowing and recognizing that, and also recognizing these artists of first, second, third, and fourth generations that have carried with them their heritage and how they have created hybrid vocabularies that are part of Latin American and Caribbean art. Really, really important. So this is an exhibition that deals with different aesthetics, and it's an exhibition that deals with different media. We have oil on canvas, we have expressionism, but we also have analytical abstraction, but we also have geometry, but we also have sculpture, video art, and installation. So it's a really rich exhibition and was an incredible journey, not only because I had 2 kids in the making of the exhibition, but also I had the opportunity to visit some of the countries and visit the artists and the artists' studios or their families and talk to them. I was able to know about more of their journey, their traditions, and those elements that have been passed from one generation to another. So that exhibition is going after Kalamazoo. It's going to the San Antonio Museum of Art in Texas, and then it's coming to the Art Museum of the Americas. So I guess that's my biggest curatorial project so far, but I'm always, while doing in those 5 or 6 years of this project, I've been doing other small projects that are related in a way to the permanent collection, or advising another curator that is working our permanent collection. And my very first curatorial project in the museum, it's not related to the collection, but it's an exhibition about the role of women in art history and how it has been represented. And it was an exhibition I created with the work of the Colombian photography Natalia Arias, and the title of the exhibition was Femininity Beyond Archetypes. So I want to tell you a little bit of what we are doing today, right now. We are in a very different time in general, both you and I. That's why I am filming this lecture from my house, and I'm not in the museum, and I really wanted to show you the inside of the museum, but because I couldn't get in, I went and I did this panel of our offices and the facade of the museum. We were sent home on March 17th. That was when we received a call that we had to drop everything that we were doing, finish, and go home. We were in the middle of the installation of a great exhibition created by Ando Gosain, Wendy Nanan. And Wendy Nanan features the work of the Trinidadian-based artist Wendy Nanan, a terrific exhibition. So we are waiting for when we can go in, install the exhibition, and be able to open to the public. But as soon as we were sent home. We were on Zoom trying to figure out what we were going to do. At the beginning, we didn't have all our tools. Um, we had our mails. We had the images of our permanent collection, but we didn't even have access to our website because it took us a little while to get remotely connected to our office. So while that was happening and we were getting connected, our director came with the idea of Ama at Home and using our social media platforms as a way of this analogy of using the platforms as the museum walls. So what we did was, with the images that we had, we put together an online exhibition titled Liquid City, of an exhibition that we had in we have a photography gallery in one of the Oasis buildings, so we were able to implement that. We were able to do a campaign that we call #AMA100 that was based on the book, and for 100 days we feature the text of the book and each of the pieces. So we have been doing projects like that. We did the same for Wendy Nanan, and Dilgosain actually helped us to organize this poetry event in which he selected 3 Trinidadian poets that wrote pieces reacting to Wendy's work, and we did that program live through Zoom, and was incredibly good. And that was #WendyNanan. And right now we are working on a project that's going to be launched very soon, titled Quarantine 40 Days and 40 Nights. And it's the photography work by a multimedia Latino artist, Cuban American artist, Jandy Pavon, who did a whole series of photographs during his lockdown in Buffalo, New York. So when the whole crisis exploded in March, Jandy lives in New Jersey, and he was visiting his girlfriend in Buffalo, New York, and he had to stay there. He decided to remain there because in New Jersey things were it was the middle of the New York crisis with cases of the virus. So he decided to remain there, and he had just a little camera, so he had to go to the dollar store, Home Depot, and improvise all his equipment, how to reflect light, and how they were going to use the flashlights to create the different scenes. And they created he and his girlfriend created a scene every single day. And this work, it's incredible, it's rich, is inspired in religion, is inspired in movies, but it's also in pop culture, but in icons of art history. And it's terrific the way that they recreated these scenes. And for us, his work, not only because his photography work is terrific, but how the exhibition is related to the pandemic and the work that the OAS is doing throughout the Americas during and after the crisis to help the countries to deal with what's going on. The exhibition has many elements. The exhibition shows how nor ours and individuals and private citizens or the governments or the institutions were ready for the pandemic at all. No one was ready. It shows the health crisis, it shows the economic crisis, and the inequity, and how inequity in this whole equation has the inequity in our society has been actually highlighted with this crisis. So it's a very interesting exhibition that fit pretty much our mission and vision at the Art Museum of the Americas. So it's Jandy, hashtag Ama Jandy Pavon. By the time you see this video, it's gonna be already live. We're gonna be showcasing every day, beginning September 3rd, all these images. It has a website, and the exhibition is actually put together through an essay that Professor Lynette Bosch wrote that tells the history of the pandemic and mix it with art history and pandemics in general, and how interconnected all the work that Jandy did was with art history. It's a terrific piece of work, both the essay and the work that Jandy did. So that's the work that we are doing right now while we reinvent. We are thinking in which other exhibitions we are going to do. I hope that you learned something from everything I had to say about the Art Museum of the Americas, and how amazing has been for us, in a way, this moment in which we are able to promote in a different way our programs, our exhibitions, and our collection. So thank you very much for the invitation. If you have any questions, please let me know. Have an amazing semester, and thank you very much.